fortunate to have two great speakers.
Our Sitecore superheroes. I think we're starting off the 2017. This is our second meetup, and so thanks guys. Jason, you're coming down from Twin Cities, right? So I guess we're going to kick this off with Jason Wilkerson presenting on Personalization, and then David to follow on personalization. First, a little bit of housekeeping. Bathrooms are on the other side of this wall over here. Food is sponsored by Laughlin Constable, so thank you for that. Do you want to say anything?
I'm Carolyn with Laughlin Constable. So we are an advertising agency. I had the pleasure of meeting these guys last fall and had the similar connection of just wanting to grow and help our teams get smarter. So it's been a great partnership, and I'm glad we could come. Thanks for having us.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing in this Sitecore learning. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to announce, or are we good to get going?
I think we're good.
Okay. Well, Jason, floor is yours.
All right. Clap after you hear me talk. Before we get into SXA, I do want to talk about a couple opportunities there are to connect with the community. There's a whole bunch of us that are on Slack day in, day out. We kind of live our life in Slack. So I'm always surprised when I see that people don't know about the Sitecore Slack channel. So I figured I'd put up a slide. So we do have a Slack channel we've got almost 2,000 users, like 1,987 or something like that. So almost 2,000 users. If you're interested in joining up on Slack, go to bit.ly/Sitecore Slack. It'll take you to a Google Docs form. Fill that out. It'll get submitted, and one of the admins will add you. We do that to try to keep recruiters out, keep it mostly just the development community, the strategist community, that kind of thing. So that's Slack. There's also Stack Exchange. So mid last year or so, one of the guys over in Switzerland started up a Stack Exchange site for Sitecore. So it's had tremendous growth over the last 6 to 9 months or so. We've got about 1,700 users, a couple thousand questions, something like that. So it's just a great resource. All the people that are hanging out on Slack all the time are hanging out on Stack Exchange, answering questions in both places. So both of those are great resources to get connected with the community and get questions answered if you have questions, things like that. The other thing I do want to mention, next to Symposium is probably the biggest gathering of Sitecore nerds on the planet. But the Sitecore User Group Conference in Europe is coming up in Amsterdam in about a month. I know it's across the pond, but if you want to come and watch me talk again, or any of the other much more qualified speakers than me. I went to the one last year in Copenhagen, and it was a fantastic conference. I mean, the quality of the sessions was great. All the speakers were awesome, and there's got 350 people there, so it was a nice sized group. It wasn't Symposium huge, but it was, so you had an opportunity to meet people from the community. So that's another great resource. So enough of the commercials. So when we talk about SXA, let's start off talking about our build process. So when I say build process, I don't mean build servers and continuous integration and continuous, those kind of things. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the process of building somebody's site, from when they sign an agreement, or if you're working for a customer, when you purchase Sitecore, from the time it goes from inception all the way through design, implementation, and content. What does that process look like for the implementations that you're doing? And how does that process affect your time to market? Because that's one of the biggest solvers, or one of the biggest things that SXA is trying to solve. So a typical build process, this isn't everybody's build process, but it's more people than you would think. At RBA, aren't quite this linear, but we're not as non-linear as, not a plug for non-linear, but we're not as non-linear as SXA tries to be, but it is a fairly linear process, especially when you get down to actually entering content. It usually comes almost towards the end, if not the end, because just all the stuff that leads up to it, all the information architecture and templates and all that kind of stuff. So it turns out to be a pretty linear process. The problem with this is that it just draws out the time to market. So, depending on the size of the implementation, that could take a number of months. And so often you spend so much time building the site that you have you've already burned all your schedule or all your budget on just building the site. And when you say, okay, now let's do some profiles, let's do some personalization. Oh, well, we're out of money because it took so damn long to build the site. So typically in this kind of linear fashion, there's no time left for the mythical phase 2, because that's when all the fun stuff happens, is in phase 2. So what if we could optimize that? So what if we could take all of those steps and start to do them more in parallel? You're accomplishing all the same things, but you're rejiggering them so that you do a lot more of them at the same time. It's going to reduce your time to market, so hopefully you're saving on time. Hopefully you're saving on budget too, to get some of those fun things going. So if we kind of build this out here, you're running the phase of this project more in parallel, so things are happening at the same time. That can happen at the same time. You spend less time and budget simply building the site, more time. I think we've already talked about all these. But one of the two biggest things about this is that because you're reacting faster, you can adapt to market changes quicker, and you can start to realize the ROI of your investment in the platform a whole lot sooner. So you're not waiting 9 months to see this new site that everybody's been talking about for 2 years or anything like that. You can start to realize some of that return on investment sooner. So that's where Sitecore Experience Accelerator comes in. So a few of the key features, and I'll start to go into depth into these in a few minutes, but just to highlight some of the key features of SXA is you have built-in information architecture. So there's a content structure that's already defined for you. So most of us by this point already know, if you've done a few of these, you already kind of know how you're going to arrange things, at least most of the time. Or you have some sort of guidance on how you normally do it. But with SXA, you've got the full information architecture already kind of defined for you. You've got some wireframing tools included in the platform itself. So this is probably one of the things that makes the whole thing work the best, because you don't have to wait for design to be finished. You don't have to wait for UX to be finished before content authors can start to enter content. Because as soon as you put some of this placeholder stuff up there, placeholder images, using a lot of these built-in controls, lore mix and text, you start to, once you get all that done, then you can turn it over to the content authors. And while you're working on the UX and the UI design, content authors can be entering content. There is a little bit of a new page architecture. The thing that they're introducing here is something that some partners have already kind of developed themselves. Some people have been doing it with other commercial products like Score from BrainJot or what was ZenGarden from Cognified. But this new page architecture allows you to essentially create chunks. Score calls them snippets. SXA calls them partial designs, but allows you to take something you couldn't previously natively do in Sitecore, but take chunks of renderings that were all kind of in placeholders and essentially something that had its own PLID, and take that as a chunk and put it on a page. Couldn't do that natively in Sitecore. Now you can. So the most popular example is going to be the header and the footer. It's going to be on every page. So you can now have more flexible control over those headers. You can create multiple versions of a header, depending on different brands or whatever, but you still have that reusable chunk that's still made up of the independent components. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. You've got now drag and drop components. So depending on who you ask, you've got between 65 and 80 of them. I counted 67. Sitecore always says 80. Don't know where the other ones come from, but I counted 67. But you've got a toolbox of essentially the basics. This is by no means a complete list of everything that you will need for your site, but it does get a lot of the repetitive stuff out of the way for you. It just kind of comes built in. Rendering variants, another really important key feature in SXA. So essentially, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, but it allows you to take the same rendering, and what we would normally do as a custom coding event is create different versions of a component, create two components that take the same template, the same content item, and just display the fields differently. Now you don't have to create different versions of the rendering anymore. Now you can do that all through UI with rendering variants. And the other part that kind of makes this whole stackable, run everything in parallel thing work is the ability to take that wireframe design, export that as an entirely static site, all the CSS, all the markup, everything. Export it as a static site, give it to a front-end guy or gal, give it to your front-end team. Let them run off and do stuff on their Macs that they do and with their kid stuff. They're non-Visual Studio people. And let them go do their CSS HTML thing, right? And then once they've styled it and made it all pretty, then you can they zip it up, or you can do it through folders, but they essentially zip it up and you can re-import it as a new style. So you now apply that new style to your site, kind of replace the wireframe thing, and you've got your, hopefully by then you've got all of your content entered, because they have been hard at work entering content this whole time. That's kind of the point, right? So you can import that in as a new style. So that's some of the key features. So let's dig in a little bit to some of those points. So I mentioned that it has a built-in information architecture. So whenever you create a site, SXA relies on PowerShell extensions to do a lot of the magic, to create a lot of the stuff in the background. So when you create a new site for a tenant, it scaffolds up the home page. It creates all of the essentially folders for all of the different components where you can put shared content. Creates all of those folders for it. Creates all the settings. Creates all the presentation things for partial designs, page designs, rendering variants, things like that. Scaffolds it all up for you so that it's all there. Doesn't take long. We'll see in the demo how quick that does happen. But it scaffolds that entire structure for you. So there's no need for you to define your own information architecture. This is designed for component-based architecture. So reusability. Who here is still putting everything on one page, all the fields? Okay, good. I'll start pointing and laughing if you were. So it's designed with that reusable content thing in mind. Well, promotes reusability of content. It's also got its fully multi-tenant support built in. So through and we'll see in just a minute, you've got the ability to do tenant folders to group tenants. You've got the ability to create tenants within those folders. You can create sites within the tenants. So at each of those levels, you can control security of who can get into what and who can manage what content. So on the wireframing side, honestly, I think I've already talked about most of this already. So you can, again, you're creating these wireframes directly in the tool. So you're using Experience Editor to drag things into placeholders, just like you would normally do, but you didn't have to build all the components. So, or at least all of the 67 components that are in the toolbox. So you can create these wireframes. You can even use this. It may not be quite as robust as other tools on the market, like Axure or some of those other well-known wireframing tools. But you can play around with workflows. You can play around with user paths and things like that. It's Experience Editor, so it's flexible. You can change things. This allows for UX and design to happen in parallel. And as you will see a few times, content entry starts immediately, because that's always the long pull, right? Is you get to the end of the project if you're doing kind of that linear or a linear-ish type implementation, and you get to content entry, and then everything shuts down for 4 months while everybody's off entering content into everything you build. So you'll see this as a recurring theme. Content entry starts immediately. So talking about the partial designs. So starting off with the page, you can take common pieces and build them up as essentially independent components, is what they end up being. But they're just, like I said a few minutes ago, they're reusable chunks. And you can create them, edit them independently within Experience Editor. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then page designs. I haven't talked about page designs yet. But page designs are essentially an accumulation of partials. So you can now take the different partial designs that you've created. You've got, in this one, we've got the header, footer, and a couple of these here. We've got kind of just a right rail page. On this one, we've got a couple of rails for different types of content. But you can store those structures as single units, essentially, as a page design. So when you create a new page, a new content page, you can point it to one of those page designs, and it will kind of grab this layout from that page design. Previously, I don't know about y'all, but we did this with branch templates, and it was much less user-friendly. Took, somebody that knew what they were doing to create them. But now it's you still got to know what you're doing, I guess. But it doesn't take a developer to do it, I guess is my point. So that's page design. Adding content. I've already kind of talked about the drag and drop feature, but adding content is as easy as dragging and dropping onto placeholders on the page. There's not anymore click the little add here button or which one of the stacked 47 add here buttons that are in the various placeholders, and hope you get the right one. Now you're dragging and dropping components into placeholders. It's really simple. And it's again, we're working with reusable components, so that everything is data source, everything supports independent data sources. So we can create shared content items. We can create local content items if it's not something that's going to be reused across pages, things like that. No developers necessary, and content entry can start as soon as the wireframes are completed. Rendering variants. Kind of introduce these in the key features piece, but rendering variants are a way for you to create different visual representations of a single content item. So in this example right here, and we'll create one in a few minutes, but in this example here, we've got the page list. So this is one of the built-in components that comes with SXA. It essentially grabs all the children of an item. You can figure on how many children, don't pull back, whatever, but grabs all the children of an item and turns them into links. So it's kind of like a menu. So we can take that and we can, the default variant that comes out of the box with it only shows the title of the page. So here I've created a couple of different variants that show the title and the meta description, and then another one that shows the title, the meta description, and then an image that's associated with the page also. So, but again, all of this stuff is, all of these variants are configured in Sitecore. Doesn't take custom code to do this. I said all that. So, Creative Exchange. So this is that importing and exporting of the visual styles from the wireframes. So it allows you to export. There's a couple of buttons up in the ribbon in Experience Editor. Export the wireframe markup in CSS. Hand that off to your front end team. They will make all that markup and all that CSS match the visual designs that have been created. And they're doing all that while content editors are creating or adding the content. Are you seeing a theme here? Kind of keep saying the same thing over and over again because that's kind of the point of the whole tool. And then, again, once all of the front end work is done, everything's been styled, all that kind of stuff, you can zip it all back up and import it in Sitecore, and it becomes your theme for your site now. So now it's demo time. So I have a site. This is a brand new install of Sitecore 8.2, update 2. And I did, let me make sure I'm logged in. I did install SXA already, so I mean that's installed. But other than that, it's got PowerShell and SXA. But other than that, it's a clean install. And I created a tenant folder, and can everybody see this? I created a tenant folder called Sitecore User Groups, a couple of tenants, one for the new user group, Green Bay, and then one for the Milwaukee user group. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new site. So from the Milwaukee tenant, I'm going to create a new site. So this is using PowerShell in the backside. So all of these dialogues and everything are built up using PowerShell extensions. So I am going to give this site a name. You can, in this dialog, you can specify an actual different host name. So if you want to, if you have a custom domain name, you can define this here. Or you could use the domain name it's under, that it's running under, and switch it to a virtual folder, either way. And then when you create these, you have a list of features that you can either enable or disable for any of these sites that you create. And then you can tell it to create a new theme. So, a group theme. I'll have it inherit from the wireframe theme.
Are you on 1.2 version of SXA?
Yes.
Okay.
Get to 1.3 in a minute.
All right.
I've downloaded it.
There's one more tab on this.
Yep. See. I've downloaded it, and I did set it up as another site on this machine just to see what was there.
Yeah.
That's as far as I got. So this will take just a minute or so to run, but in the background, this is doing all that scaffolding of all the content items, all the structure under content. It's also creating stuff in the media folders and in the layout renderings, following all the helix structure. So creating the foundation feature and project folders, creating the project specific folder for this site. It's creating all that same structure in the templates folder as well. I will say one thing, SXA 1.3 that was just released today is a little faster than this. It spins up the site a little quicker. This will be done in a second. So now we've got our site, and again, we've got all of our scaffolding of everything is already there. So what I want to do under the home page is I'm going to create a couple of pages. A couple of pages. Then I add some content. Add some content to these pages just to give them something. And then I'm going to go, because we're going to do a rendering variant of page list in just a minute, I'm going to go fill in a couple of these other fields. So I'm going to pick one of these little wireframe images, and then under our meta description, this is my account page. Got some stuff. Do the same thing with numbers. This image. This will get excited. So now that I've got a few pages, before I move into wireframing up some of this stuff, I'm gonna build a couple of partial designs. So because I'm gonna use these when I build the page, I want to create these ahead of time. So down in the, so just to talk about this scaffolding, this information architecture for a second. You've got your content for all your pages. Under each of these pages, if you create any local content that's just to be used on that page, it'll appear in a folder called data underneath that page. I'm sure we all use a similar variation in that, but it will create local versions of content for just things only used on that page. The data folder here is all of these are essentially a bunch of the content, or the components that are in the toolbox. These are where you would put shared content. And then you've got presentation, the presentation node, and the settings node. Settings node is stuff about the site and settings on the site. It's appropriately named node. But then you've got, under presentations, this is where you're going to find things about page designs, partial designs, rendering variants, style variants, things like that. So I'm going to stick with the partial designs for now. Insert a partial. And call this header. Another one. Footer. So just like I would when I go to a page in the content tree and then go to Experience Editor, edit it, any of these partial designs, I can go up to Publish and open Experience Editor on that partial and just edit the information of the, edit the layout for that partial design. And I probably should have loaded up Experience Editor before I started. While that's loading, I'll create one more. I'm not going to do that because it's loading. So, how's y'all's day been? Just sit here and watch it spin.
Grab another beer.
Good time for some pizza.
For those not familiar with the XXA tool, for like from the developer standpoint, is this
Can you just describe kind of what audience is this for specifically?
It's going to mostly be for designers and marketers, people that are building pages, people that are authoring content, things like that. It's important as developers to understand about it, because while it's got these 65 to 80 built-in components, it's not going to have everything. So you will create your own custom components. We won't have a lot of time to go into that today, but you will create your own custom things, and they need to be kind of built in an SXA compliant manner, kind of following that same pattern. So in that sense, developers are a perfect audience for SXA also, because you'll be great stuff to put in the toolbox and all that kind of stuff. So now in the header, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, here's all of our built-in. They're grouped by similar groups. But what I'm going to go is I'm going to go to page structure, and there's a splitter component. I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it to the header. And this is the 1.2 version of SXA. 1.3 changes this a little bit. But so I've now got two columns, and I'm going to make this kind of follows just a typical grid pattern. Make that 3 wide, make this side 9 wide. And then this placeholder, I'm going to put an image, a reusable image. So what this is going to do is this is going to give me the opportunity to create a content item under that /data folder under images. So I'm going to create company logo. So it'll create that reusable content item for me. And I will go to select image. I'm just going to keep picking my little wireframe image here. And then over the right hand side, where I'm going to put some, you typically see some navigation. So let's drag that over there. So this pops up the control properties for the component properties for this. So in here, you've got a lot of options, and you can add to these options as well. But here's some of the styles that you can apply to this component. So I'm going to choose main navigation, and I'll say position it on the right. So we'll pop it over there. And for now, that's all I want to do for the header. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to do the same thing for the footer. And in this one, I'm going to do another column splitter. And this one I'm going to split them even, so they're going to be 6 wide each. So, page content, I'm going to put in a reusable rich text component. On the left hand side of the footer, I'm going to create a content item. Stick that in there. Over on the right-hand side, you might see something about privacy policy or typical kind of footer navigation type stuff, but I'm not bothered with that. But in here, I'm going to put a little copyright notice. And that's all I have for the footer for now. So save that. And then one more partial. This is going to be my article body. So I'm going to create a page design for an article. So my article body, I'm going to put experience editor. And through the other two partials, we created header and footer. And but we haven't done anything with this main placeholder yet. So what I'm going to do, the same thing we already did. I'm going to add a splitter to the main component, the main body. So make this 4 wide, make this 8 wide. And in the left rail of my article pages, I want to always have a page list. So essentially a menu of all the pages that are children of that item. So kind of done with that. Now that I've saved those partials, I'm going to create the actual page design. So this page design, remember, is the accumulation of all these partials into something that we can apply directly to a page. So I'm going to create a page design called article page. And now I have the opportunity to select which partials I want to include. So I'm going to do the art and the header, body, footer, and then all our metadata. So now that we've got that saved, let's go to home page. Let's open this in Experience Editor. Warmed up already. So because we haven't done anything to the actual layout or anything for the home page or any of those other pages yet, it's still got our 3 basic placeholders, header, footer, and main. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Experience Accelerator tab, and we'll say pick page design. And this is going to allow me to pick any of the page designs that we've created. I've created one. I select my article page. Save that, and now is where you ooh and ah about the ease with which this was done. But anyway, so now we've got that page structure is already there for you. So now all I need to do is insert content into the body of the page. So we do that. So drag a title component to the page, to this body here, and this is pulling from the title of the page itself. So the title field of that content item, and then I'm going to do the page content and drag that over there too. And this is going to pull from the current item, but it pulled, this is all that text I put in the content field. So we've kind of built up our page already. So now if we were done, we could at this point export it out and for the front end folks to go do their thing. Except that the title's a little small. Okay? I mean, SEO value, blah, 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 things like that. We don't want search engines to know what this is about. So this is a little small. So this is where the idea of variants come in. So I've got our page designs, partial designs. Let's go to rendering variants. So under this is you've got a lot of the built-in components here. So I'll find the title component. And we see we've got our default title, or our default rendering variant for title. And if you look at this, so this is the title field. It's a variant field template item. So this allows you to specify the HTML tag that it uses, also the field name for the content item that you want displayed there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variant H1 title. So in that H1 title, I want to put a field. This will be my title. So our field name on that template item is title. It is the title. But we're going to say this is going to be an H1. If we save that, refresh Experience Editor here, and go look at our title component. Go up to the actual component. Variance go. You're supposed to get a little variance drop down. It shows up here. Well, I'll just do it. Normally, there's a drop down just underneath this this toolbar that allows you to select the variant, but you can also do it from the component properties. So here in this variant field, I've got our default variant, which is just the div of the title, but I'm going to select our H1 title. Okay there, and now we've got an H1. So again, no code involved to make this change, displaying the same content from the same content item. So what if we wanted to get a little bit more, a little bit fancier than that? So let's go look at the page list. So over in our in the left-hand side here, we've got the default page list. So it's just got the title of each of the pages that are children. So from there, I'm going to go, we're still under rendering variants, and we've got our default one here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one. This time I'm going to do image, title, and description. And I'll just start adding the fields I want displayed. And the order of these children under this variant is the order in which they'll be displayed on the screen. Let's insert a field for, this is going to be title. This one I want to be an H2. And then page description. This is an example of the display name for that field on the template was page description, but the template, the field name is actually called meta description. Let's save that. And we're going to turn the title into a link. And if we go reload this page, let's see. Oh, we got to go to partial design. So since we are in an actual page content item, we can't make any changes to any of the other pieces, any of the other parts of the partial design. So you can go to partial design there, and the part that I want to make a change to is an article body. It's in the page list. So here I will edit my properties and just select my variant. So save that, and then go back to our page. And we'll see our new variant displayed in the household display. But if you notice, I've got my description above my title. It's not the way I wanted it. I want it the other way around. Again, order matters. We will display them in the order that they are in the tree. So I want title to come before description. So now if I refresh that, now I've got title and meta description. So that's rendering variants. How am I doing on time?
Doing okay. I do have a question for you though. For the rendering variant itself, you know, things like data annotation, stuff like that, can that be included and extended in those variants currently? Or is that still not there yet?
Data annotations?
Yeah, like if we want to do some kind of semantic tagging or something like that.
You can, there is a place in the field for adding link attributes.
Okay.
But that only applies to links, doesn't apply to anything else. So I don't know the answer. There might be a way to do it. I don't know how.
Okay.
But I know a few guys that do though. So I could ask. So the other thing I was going to show, now that we've gone through rendering variants, partial designs, page designs, things like that, The other thing I was going to show is the ability to export the wireframing, modify it in some non-visual studio editor, and then import it back in. So what I'm going to do is in the Experience Accelerator tab, I'm going to choose to export. Now from here you can choose to export a single page, a branch of pages in your content tree, or the entire site. I'm going to let it go through the whole site. And it's got some other options here. You can export it to a zip file and then just send a zip file around and then re-import a zip. You can also export it to a folder. So I've actually heard of some folks that export to a folder and then the front end guys go do their thing in that folder, and then they don't have to pass you back a zip file to import. You just go to that location and import that folder. So that's kind of another way of doing it. So I will export this out. And I'm going to download this zip file. And unzip it. Unzip this one. So small. So when I unzip that file, now we've got our folder structure, all our pages, and all of the assets. And everything. So what I've got the My Accounts page, my account page that we created, the member page, index.html. This is our home page that we can edit. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into user groups, shared images. This is the place where I pulled in the company logo. So that's what I'm going to change. So I have a logo here. It's a much better version of the logo. The wireframe. So it's Sitecore extensions logo. And then go back up to our home page. And let's edit this. So here's all the markup that makes up the home page. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to find my little wireframe-tiny PNG. I'm going to change that to the new file name that I put in that folder. And Sitecore is going to know what to do with this to import it based on these data dash attributes. So we've got the item, we've got the ID here, and we've got the field where it needs to import it into. So that's how it knows how to kind of put the things back together when you import. So I changed my file name and I saved it. So let's go do some magic. Zip this up. I'll say updated image. So now that I've got that saved out there, I'm going to go to SXA. Reload this. And then I'm going to choose to import. So I'm going to import a zip file. If we had done kind of the other path where everything was in a folder, we could import it from that folder directly. But I'm going to choose zip file. So let me upload my new change. Choose a file, upload style. No, that's not that one. That was my test one. Image. Aha. So that uploads to the packages folder, let's close that and then hit next. And then we'll import into a bunch of magic. And all this other stuff is some theming things that I haven't actually gone through yet, but we can see that top item, that it replaced our shared images. It uploaded the Sitecore extensions logo. So it's successful. Refresh, this should change. It's not supposed to do that. Let's see what we do. So we go down to our media library. Projects, Milwaukee, here's our shared images. We have our new item, our Sitecore extensions logo. Under data, images, our company logo. See, it updated the place that the item that it's pointing to. Okay, so there's a bug I can file with SXA 1.2 now that 1.2 is out. But you can see that it did some, in my testing at home, this worked great. But you can see that you can make changes to the exported content, import it back in, and all should be well. So that's kind of the idea behind, and that is Creative Exchange, which is what they call it. So we go back to our, that's all I got for the demo. So if we go back to the So there is some exciting news. As of yesterday and today, we have new versions. Well, kind of let the cat out of the bag a little early, but that's all right. So anyway, many of you may have seen Sitecore 8.2 Update 3 was released yesterday, and SXA 1.3 was released today. So if you go look at the release notes, there's all kinds of information about performance improvements for the Sitecore version, and lots of other things in there too. Lots of goodies. On the SXA side, there's also a lot of improvements. There's stuff about JSON, headless JSON accelerator, something. I haven't dug into it a whole lot because it just came out today. But the biggest change, the biggest important piece of SXA 1.3, Bootstrap. It supports Bootstrap, not just the 960 grid, whatever the hell that was. Maybe they use it in Europe a lot, I don't know, I've never heard of it, but now it supports Bootstrap. So all of that is handled, so it supports multiple grids. And I think there's even something in there about custom grid formats that will support that too. But. So wrapping up, some of the benefits of SXA, wrap things up here. Content maintenance, content entry, creation of all content authorship is much simpler, much faster now. Your site is responsive by default, so you don't have to worry about working with all of your. We're using containers that are part of the toolbox that are all responsive. So your site's responsive by default. Parallel execution of all these steps provides value to the customer or to the client sooner, so that hopefully you get to the fun stuff, which is usually in phase 2 that never happened. So reduced initial build time leaves time for additional configuration, tuning, and content optimization. So all the fun profile stuff, personalization, all those things that really are the value add for Sitecore, make it worthwhile. So how do you get started with this? Well, it's pretty easy. These steps will change now, but because SXA 1.3 requires Sitecore 8.2 Update 3, that's a lot of numbers. But 1.2 just requires 8.1 Update 3 or above. PowerShell extensions 4.5 is required for all of these. And then go download and install SXA 1.2 or 1.2 plus. and then get to building. Questions?
Have they done anything to add in JavaScript components?
I think 1.3 has a lot of stuff in about, there's a lot of stuff in the release notes. I'm just quickly browsing today, but a lot of stuff in there about JSON and things like that. So, and I think they were talking about JavaScript components as well for single page applications, things like that. So I think they added support for that in 1.3, but I have to verify that.
What's their update cycle look like? How far from when 1.2 came out till now was the time frame there? And how frequently was that?
I don't know what their official release cycle is. I think 1.2 came out 3 months ago, maybe just something like that. So I'd put $5 on every 3 months. You know, so. Other questions?
No. So, like right now, we're using a centralized media library for all of our, PNGs, JPEGs. Does that work into the import? Like, how can you, I guess, utilize a media library on that so you can reuse those images so they're not just contained on the one page in one component?
Well, it's not. It's all based on the structure that you provided it. So it imported that image that I put into that folder into the place where I put it in that folder structure of the exported zip. Okay. So if you're using images in some other structure outside of necessarily that tenant, then it should put those images in the same place. Okay. And just repoint that content item to that new image. I have to test that, but it should work that way.
And you modified the HTML, which was pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that, but CSS would work the same?
Yep. In fact, really the only thing you modify for on the HTML side is going to be images probably, or even links maybe. That is one, we'll have to see how the front-end teams deal with this, because one thing they're not going to have control over is structure of the HTML. So they can't go all of a sudden take this whole div and wrap it in another div and stuff like that. They can't do that because it starts to violate the structure that's there. So, but the main thing that the front-end team should be working on is going to be the CSS stuff. So all the style. And all of that gets re-imported into, all that CSS is actually stored as a field. Yeah, not raw content, but it's stored as a file and attached to a content item in the theme media library. So all that CSS stuff gets minified and all that.
If our designers are using Sass and bound structures and
doesn't support Sass yet.
Okay.
So we're probably gonna have a hard time with that too. So honestly, I know that the team that's working on SXA is aware of that. I don't know how they're going to solve it. I don't know what their timeline is to solve it, but I know they're aware of it. So,
what's the idea with this for environments? So if you don't really need multiple development environments, I suppose with this, was the idea you just have a production environment and just publish like a CM and CD, or what's the infrastructure around the use of this?
It should be the same that you work with today.
Okay.
Governed by the company, because many companies are regulated. Therefore, the workflow and things like that require a full QA deployment cycle and this kind of thing. When a non-regulated company, then yeah, go out there and stick it and use the version that's in Sitecore built in.
I will say I haven't done anything in any kind of actual real-world environment with this, so I haven't come across those scenarios yet. It's all been on my laptop. So
this is putting a lot of faith in those front-end people. Have you tried like break, like putting, like corrupting that file and trying to import? Is there a way to roll it back? Is there a way to?
Well, it's versioned like everything else. Okay. So it's just a content item. And I mean, if you look at, we go look at this. Where's my mouse? Collapse all this down. Go to the media library. Here's our themes. So under our project, Milwaukee user group, here's our theme. So under this theme, we've got our styles, and it's got all these content items, and then it's at the bottom, it's got the main content item. So again, this is just a content item, so it gets versions like everything else.
Right.
So to the question about SAS, then you would just have your front-end team have the output of their SAS compilation be dumped into the file that then gets re-imported.
It could, yeah, it could do that.
That's one flow you probably.
Yeah, that could be a scenario. I'm not a CSS guy, so I'm not one of those people. I use Visual Studio, so so I'm sure one of those smart Mac people that do all the fancy CSS stuff will come up with some way to make it work.
You said you could set, it would support custom grids. So, for example, we're not using Bootstrap, we're using Foundation.
Mm-hmm. It supports Foundation too.
Foundation.
That's a named one. Yeah. So the three named grid systems it supports is 960, Foundation, and Bootstrap.
And that's as of 1.3?
That's a 1.3.
So before that it was just...
Just 960 grid.
Okay.
Yeah, so it supports Foundation.
Great.
And when you create and this is the fourth tab that you were talking about, when you create a new site with 1.3, the first tab is all the site information, second tab is features, third one is the theme where you create and name the theme. The fourth tab, which is a new one, is select your grid system. And you can select Bootstrap, Foundation, 960. I think I read something about it supporting custom grids. So I would imagine at that point you're creating a content item somewhere for your custom grid system. Again, I'm not a CSS guy.
Do you know if that's just when you set up a new site, or do you switch back and forth so you don't change any of the stuff behind the scenes?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's a setting, so I'm sure you can change it. What impacts that has after you've started building, I mean, all the grid geometry is handled as content in all these content items. So I would imagine the way they solved it is by abstracting some of that gridness so that they can apply the implementation, I would imagine. So, but I don't know the definite answer for you.
Probably better off spinning up a new site.
At least to test it in dev, do that first. But any other questions?
Sure. So 2 questions for you. So for those of us that spend a lot of time building our own component library, how easy is this to adopt and then reformat our components to fit the SXA methodology?
Yeah, don't say it too fast.
Yeah,
then it turns into sexy, and then it's a whole different talk. Well, so I've read some blog posts about creating custom SXA renderings. It involves creating a controller, injecting a repository, a view, and some stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. It does assume that your controllers are inheriting from like an SXA base controller or something like that. Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. But so, how much work it would be to port your stuff over to that, I really don't know. It depends on how much abstraction there is and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it supports dependency injection like everything else. So if your components are injecting dependencies in and everything, I would imagine you could do the same thing and just inherit from the SXA base controller.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Second question too. So as far as search, how does it index the pages? Is it a computed rendering? And then, so how does it manage field level linking?
that's a great question for Slack or Stack Exchange. I'm sorry, I don't know the correct answer to that one.
For the question about changing grid, they did update the dock site already today as well.
Oh, okay.
So they did talk about the fact that you can change your grid system afterward, but it will break your layouts because
I would imagine
everything is going to change everything, so you have to have manual changes to that if you change your system.
Okay.
But they did update dock site immediately today, which was nice.
Oh, nice.
So has a whole section on the grid selection.
And there is a tool, I was reading, there's a tool for upgrading from, essentially, because they refactored a lot in 1.3, there is a tool available to essentially upgrade you from 1.2 to 1.3 to make it a Sitecore relatively painless experience. So if you come across any other questions that you might have, I am available on Slack, Twitter, and that's my blog, so it's Sitecore. You can contact me any of those ways. That's it.
My role at Layer 1 Media is to oversee the delivery team and bring thought leadership and technical expertise to all of our clients. The challenges associated with B2B marketing technology are typically the implementation of an overall solution. There's a lot of tools and platforms available to customers, and unfortunately, customers grasp at all of them, and so they end up with Frankenstein solutions that have many different pieces in place, and unfortunately, that ends up exacerbating poor business process. Our platforms and technologies are not random choices. We've selected the best in breed technologies for what they are, for e-commerce, for content management, for customer relationship management. But at the same time, we believe that the fusion of those technologies brings and amplifies capabilities for businesses.
All right, so supposedly you did something.
You can't prove it.
We can't even say the word better around the office without being like, boom-ch. It's crazy how one simple idea, one word, better, could just totally take over, and you're seeing it everywhere.
Basically, to go along with the TV commercial of a family trying to sink a raft, we shot in 360 video the family partaking in the TV commercial activity, which was trying to sink this raft.
We do over 1,000 versions of spots per year.
Recently, we had the opportunity to do a video, which it happened to be in the super sexy category of foil lidding. It's still about telling a good story, and it's still about, talking to people as human beings.
It's truly rewarding to go and help somebody who's doing something great for the community. Any community, if they're doing something great, we want to be behind it.
It's an example of what really good social media can look like. It can be thought-provoking, and it can get people thinking. We thought maybe this is a way to sort of take that negative energy associated with the election and turn it into something positive for breast cancer. It just so happens that there's a right and left in politics and a right and left in breasts.
For last summer, the agency produced 2 spots. One of them was about dogs, and then another spot we did was all about the supper clubs. And then what's really neat with it is that we were able to extend that experience into the real world by creating physical supper clubs into sports arenas. So yeah, I think they serve like 20-ounce old fashions there, which is just what you need.
Someone in the agency had a contact with a really great artist, Frank Anderson, who's an animator, illustrator, musician. He does everything, and he basically did it for nothing because he believed in the cause. I mean, it doesn't happen often in any agency, I don't think. I think it's pretty rare that you find something that people are so excited about that they're jumping to work on it for free.
The The work is just a complete testament to craft, both in writing and art direction. There isn't a single image that you'll see in any of the work, from the outdoor to the print posters, that doesn't just scream, read me, look at me, spend some time with me, because there isn't a detail that's been missed.
It just seemed like a really fresh way of doing things. If a script wasn't working there on the spot, we'd just go and change it and feed them lines. It seems like things will be going more that way, where we have more control over the creative, and then we have more control over the final product, because these projects can be done in-house, which is just an exciting prospect.
All good? Okay. Well, I think we'll kick into David's presentation here, and before we do, I just want to thank Jason again. Thank you for presenting, and David also. So going forward, all of our presenters are going to get a little thank you gift to say Sitecore or Milwaukee Sitecore User Group cake. So that everyone hands out pens and other things, but you guys are the real superheroes of Sitecore, so we'll get you a nice little cape here. So thank you.
The cape goes well with the beard. Paul, can we start passing those out before and they can wear it during the presentation?
We did this all wrong. You gotta put it on now.
Where in the world?
It goes well with my presentation anyway.
No, it's an adult. Yes,
It's just not me-sized adults.
Yeah, so it's
No, that's good.
Now, anytime you do a Sitecore presentation, you have to wear that cape.
You have to represent David Walker.
I can do that. All right. So he now owns the place, and we can be here till closing, right? So personalization and integration unleashed. David Walker, 2015 technology MVP, is senior Sitecore architect here at Layer 1, and been doing development for too long. Shows how old I am. That's my secret to age and beauty, is to keep it shaved so you don't see the gray. That Sitecore will travel. This is about, I think, the 8th time total I gave this presentation. I did it at the ShugCon in Louisiana 2 years ago now. Then did it once in Houston, Symposium last year, and then I just did a trip of about 5 user groups over in the Northeast, including New York City, Boston, etc. I'm also going to present in Amsterdam next May. That's 4 or 5 weeks away. So this is the mythical phase 2. Is really what I'm talking about, the personalization and integration. So most of that, the first part especially, but it is unleashed. I'm not a professor, first off. Otherwise I might do this to keep you awake. I'm not a politician. If I was, I would do something like this.
Yeah.
I'm more of someone that finds a passion in things and gets a little bit pounding on my chest and starts talking about it. But I know everyone's short on time and money. Teamwork, right? Everything, and storytelling. So there's a story behind this, and that's what I'm sharing with you. People don't buy goods and services, they buy stories and feelings and all that. And so since it is already 7:40, I'll go pretty quick. If anytime, I'm not a professor, again, so feel free to raise your hand if you have questions, etc. I find, even though I've given this like 8 times, I get something out of every single time I do it because of the questions. So somebody always comes up with a good new one. Right? And now it's showtime. So I have 4 main goals for the presentation. The first one is to save you money, time, by reducing the number of iterations that it takes you to do personalization and integration. I'll give you an overview of the personalization, and that's where I'll go really fast. How many of you have seen the Sitecore 8 slide decks on what the personalization features and enhancements are? Only a few, okay? Maybe I'll go a little slower. If I go too fast, just let me know. I can always go back. Then, again, this is more of a story, and then at the end, for those that are more your advanced developers, I'll throw in some .NET Core stuff. Not too deep. But the first question I like to start out with is, how many are not developers? Okay. And then obviously, is everyone else developers then? Or architects? Okay. All right. So if you had a magic lamp and you could make wishes, or your company, your customers all got 3 wishes, what would you wish for, they wish for? Hopefully there's some overlap there. But number 1, you're here learning more about the capabilities of you delivering for them in Sitecore. And then hopefully you can come up with some others. You can be the superhero, or at least the Sitecore superhero. Thanks to Eric, Sitecore Eric, for letting me steal those. Then the sky is blue, and the birds are singing, everyone's happy, right? But the real reason you're here is because no Sitecore instance is an island, the integration part. So this part is not the mythical phase 2, because you always have something that you're going to have to integrate with. How many of you have had a Sitecore instance that is an island that did not connect to or touch anything else? Efficiently will help, but it's spread out through everywhere, and that's the beautiful thing of the Beta Sitecore 7.5 and forward, with the XDB capabilities behind it, is now with XDB you can get all that data synchronized, centralized, and then easily use Sitecore to personalize it based off that data. How many of you have seen the Sitecore profile, or the user profile, prior to Sitecore 8? How many of you are using Sitecore 8 and up? Okay. So this is revolutionary in that regard, because it used to look just like, and I know on one of the versions of this I actually had a screenshot, it looked like the old ugly Windows user profile, because all it showed was what member user groups that you're a role of. And that was it, minus some really ugly text boxes that you could hard code some stuff in. But with this, it comes out of the box with 5 tabs. You can easily add additional tabs. If you have an ERP system, an order system, a customer support system, your content editors on the backside could easily tab over and look at all that information right there. Get that 360-degree view of that customer. Including all those nice pie charts and graph charts of which page they came to. Did they do the engagement goals of what your site is trying to achieve, and all those things, right? And again, the experience platform is an actual platform because it has all these things built in. The personalization, specifically, the slide from Sitecore said you can use any XDB data to personalize. How many of you have seen the personalization rule editor? Okay. So, and that is, if I have time at the end, I will demo some of that, because not all of you raised your hand. But basically, you pick a component on your site and say you want to personalize it. And the very first thing you have to do is have obviously at least 2 pieces of that same content with some kind of change to it. Otherwise, there's no point in changing it. But at that point, there's hundreds of rules already built in that you get to pick from to say how you want to personalize. And Sitecore likes to say that, again, you can do that off of any XDB, but the whole core of this presentation is to say that you can do it off of any data. Don't limit yourself to just XDB. Because as a developer, all you're doing is creating the macro rules that allows the personalization editor or person setting it up to say this is what the rule should be, and I'll give you better demos and examples of that here in a minute. But that's what allows you to customize that component at a component level for every visitor of the site, etc. And with Sitecore 8 forward, you get to do that at every component for every visitor, and then also have all these nice pie charts and numbers to see how that maps back to the full-blown marketing team's implementation of what their engagement value and all the goals and all those things are. But if you don't have all that set up, then it doesn't do you a whole lot of good, right? But as a minimum, the personalization feature is not dependent on that, but once you set it all up, then yes, you get great reports and things of that nature. And With 8, you get to test and optimize it. So it actually allows the content editors to gamify their ability to say which piece of content do they think is going to be more effective on the site. I always like to pick on e-commerce sites. Those are the easiest. You're trying to sell something. And this piece of content sells something versus this one's not. The content editors can say, I think this one is going to sell. But if they're not right, then their score isn't as high. And now internally as a team, you can say, oh, this guy's, he's always picking the good stuff. We want him to edit our content. And then also, Sitecore doesn't like to talk about it very much, but they actually use Azure machine learning behind the scenes when you have set this up. And it uses an artificial intelligence machine learning algorithm to determine and monitor which one is performing better. So that if you say, for this piece of content, I want this one or that one, and it says, well, this one's selling the product, then it will set that as the one that should be displayed. Once you set that all up. So how many of you tried personalization before Sitecore 8? And how many of you created fake user accounts or a backdoor system to say, you're Billy Bob, now you can go in and see what the site looks like for Billy Bob. Because that's what you had to do in the past. Or, again, create all these fake accounts. And then say, well, this one guy is from, I want to personalize based off of being here 5 times, being from the state of Texas, or wherever. With Sitecore 8, now, you've got all these nice toolboxes on the sides where you can actually simulate what the person is going to see without having to create all those fake accounts and etc. You can simply go in here and click a couple things, and now this is what it would look like if you're coming here on a weekday, at the end of the month when you have sales, etc. And again, all the different reporting and optimization gauges and dashboards and percentages, etc. Across all channels, so it's not just Sitecore, the federated experience, federated database. You can inject JavaScript on non-Sitecore sites, and now you can also gauge and monitor and measure how effective those are. And now back to basic personalization out of the box. So I saw a few hands that some of you have done personalization, and it's really easy. But for the most part, it all starts with, as an editor, I want to personalize content because X, Y, Z. The one I like to pick on is location, context aware. It always kind of seems to make the person feel a little more comfortable. Oh, you know me, you know where I'm from. And I do know that a lot of people say, wait a minute, what about the creepy factor? You're following me, what does that mean? And I do agree that most of the generations of, at least a few generations younger than mine, because I'm so young, would maybe agree with that. But the younger generations today are the opposite. Why aren't you giving me my history? Why do you not know all these things about me already? And so it's quite the inverse. And it's only going to keep getting that way as people get that way. Well, in fact, you know, it used to be how many people are going to put their credit card information on the website? Not very many. Now everyone does it. Look at how much Amazon is. But in this context, I like to take a step back and say, I'm trying to deliver personalization capabilities. And so my customer, in this case, is not the visitor to my website. It is the content editor that is going to have to manage and maintain all these rules. And I'll show you an example of that. But first, as a developer, you want to enhance that experience for them. So personalization is very easy to enhance out of the box. And the first example of that, I'd like to mention, how many of you know what a region is in Sitecore? Just one? So, you know, it was built in Europe. So a region in this case is a state for us here in the US. And then I call it group, but you can think of it as a sales district, whatever, Microsoft, Sitecore, all big companies that have global sales teams and teams spread out the US usually break their teams up by geography. There's the central, there's the south central, north central, whatever you want to do that. And as a content editor, if I wanted to say, if somebody comes to my site, they should know, one, who the salesperson they should talk to and or who the support person they should talk to. And so as a content editor, now I get to pick their picture and their name and their phone number or email address, and now say, well, for this piece, I want to display this one for Texas, this one for Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana is usually South Central, and then up here is the North Central, it's these states, etc., etc. You get the point. You're looking at 5, 6, maybe 10 regions, depending on the size of your organization, how many people it is. But you are having to say for each region this, which is Texas, Oklahoma, you're creating all these rules and having to maintain them. The region group, the concept there is you simply create some content items over here and give it a name, South Central, whatever you want to name it, and then stick under the states underneath it. Now, as a content editor, I say for South Central, display these people, or this picture, that piece of content. So now you've just reduced it from 50, potentially, for 50 states, down to maybe 10 rules. All right? And so that's a pretty decent cut, 20%, 80% reduction in work volume. And that's per content item. So again, if you had sales versus support, now that was duplicated. You'd had to create that many rules, etc. So you get the moral of that story. To create that region group, all I did was Google, how do I create a new personalization rule, and I got back all the samples, how to do it, and there's like 5 lines of code in reality here. That's all it took. Then you're creating a macro so that the content editor gets to click and say, type in the text of Texas, or pick from the drop down, etc. It's very simple. But the problem with that is you're going to get so excited, yay, I can do that. And you'll end up creating that same type of effort for them, again, potentially, even though you're trying to reduce it, because it really has to boil down to, again, knowing that they are your customer and what is it they're trying to do and how can you make it simpler for them. So that's the moral of this story, is the lessons I've learned in delivering this and playing with personalization, is that the developers get that excitement and then they get the tunnel vision, and that's where they write their code. Because then the next thing is you get you can't fully use the code that you just spent the time so elegantly writing throughout the entire platform. All it is stuck right there in the personalization piece. Okay? And so the moral of the story for developers is to don't just write the code right there, because what is Sitecore written on? .NET, right? And therefore, at .NET level components, you can integrate with Sitecore. You don't have to do it in the boxes that they always give you, such as a personalization rule context in this case. So the next thing that I looked at was, now I know, roughly where they're at. How about weather? It's the easy one. There's dozens of providers for that. And that's where I start to integrate, and now have about 40 to 50 APIs that I've touched. But in essence, you can integrate with anything. It's a matter of finding the API. Now it's a treasure hunt, right? What one is of value to a content editor for them to deliver some type of personalization on the site for their users or visitors. The one I really liked, I came up with right before ShowCon and put it in overnight, which was Google Places. So as a content editor, I think that's the next slide. Weather first. Used Open Weather Map, and this is kind of coming back again to intelligently design your rules. So the first one I integrated with was Open Weather Map, and now as a content editor, I can say if the temperature is greater than, less than, whatever range I want, and then display, hey, don't forget the umbrella, wear warm clothes, whatever, buy our pocket heaters, whatever you're trying to sell, those kind of things. Several real estate services, Trilia, average house price in that area, number of properties, Wolfram Alpha. How many of you heard of that one? Okay, and I'm going to guess you had a high school student or someone else that was doing geometry, algebra. It's Google for algebra. You put in some algebraic equation and boom, it gives you some really great answers. But my high school senior son was doing that, and I saw at the bottom there's a developer API. I looked at it, you put in zip code space, and now it pulls back all these what they call chunks, I think, I don't remember, but different data sets on that area. So you could use that for GeoIP lookup. Sitecore does have a cloud instance that they do very cheap and effectively and efficiently, but with this API, you would get all these other data sets back. However, all these APIs will have various price tags on them based off of usage, etc., just like Sitecore's. But if there is a piece of data that does matter to you, you get to pick and choose. It's not that hard. And again, it's a matter of finding those value points that are important to you. Wolfram Alpha does give back household value, housing units. I don't think they do crime stats, but that is another one that's out there. The US government does that free, but again, if you can find one that does what you need in one service call versus having to make more than one service call. Because the other thing to keep in mind with these service calls is many of them have the terms of agreement of your usage of it. You can't cache it, you can't store it. For every request, you're supposed to make that request. You have to be careful of those so that you are operating under your appropriate agreement for what you're paying for. Otherwise, then I definitely recommend storing what you're trying to personalize based off of into XDB, so you're not having to make that call again for that user. It's right there on their profile. Right? Wolfram Alpha, though, does have one other piece that I like to use or talk about, and that is the percentage of land versus water in that geography. So if you sell boats, you know they live in a land area, they're going to have a trailer. Maybe they want to upgrade the trailer. Those kind of things. And Zillow, they have same thing with prices of houses, but they also have a commute time, average commute time in that area. And you sell books on tapes, or you have a partner with someone that does, so you try to bundle that in the cars you're selling. So then it comes down to, again, the moral of the story is really on this type of thing is you're a digital marketer or a content editor, and you want to personalize content. So what are the usage scenarios of this? Number one, I thought that you could try to sell security products or more security products for high crime areas. Since the US government releases their crime stats freely, I don't think they have any kind of terms of agreement as far as how many times you can call the thing, store that stuff in XDB, and now when your visitor comes to your site, you can say, oh, they're in a high crime area, you need to buy some personal security products. So nearby locations. I think after I go through these, I go back to the Walmart Google Places slide. But you get the point. You sell products and, hey, you can go over to this store and buy it. Average area income. Well, man, they're living in Beverly Hills. They can afford the diamond gold studded bracelet versus, the friendship bands. Education level. Heck, maybe you are trying to help them sell a scholarship, or I don't know, because they're not as an educated area. But that's what I've kind of tried to do is come up with some of these things just to help along, because I found how many of the few of you that have done personalization, how many of you have actually had a customer that ends up using it efficiently or effectively on their sites? See, just one, two. And that's been the case over every time I've delivered this presentation, is it seems like about 90% this is a mythical phase 2 that nobody ever gets to. And some of that ends up because the marketing teams say, well, what can we do with it? And then the development team says, well, Sitecore is this marketing powerhouse platform. It can do whatever you want. What do you want it to do? And then it becomes this catch-22 because, well, tell us what it can do. And so now you, as a developer, have to come up with the ideas, right? You could sell, again, water versus land. And then at the end of the day, it matters what's the use cases that are a benefit to your customers, your site visitors, so that you can enhance their experience. And then all of this is really just an effort, again, to accelerate your maturity in this area. And so the Google Places API that I came up with, for this scenario, this is a company that sells their products at Walmart. So for those content editors, it was easier to create a rule that says where Walmart locations. And all I have to say is greater than 0. That means there's a Walmart nearby. Now I can show the content that says, go buy my product at the Walmart, right? And even give them an address, etc., Google Map integration, whatever. But that was the most simplest rule for them, is that there is a Walmart nearby, and they could even get to the point where they don't even have to put in anything. As a macro, I could create as many of these as I want. It's just a matter of what's easiest for the content editors to use. And again, you can see the sample where there's one that's greater than 1. But if you look right above that, it says where the query is there. What that meant is now the content editor can click on the word and enter in Walmart or Starbucks or any other name brand, whatever location, a Target store. You get the point. It then searches the Google Places API to find if there's one nearby and will direct you there. But you maybe don't want the content editors to have to do that on every single rule. So that's the kind of gist of it. I like to use the example that I don't like to play bar prices for liquor, so where's a liquor store nearby? And then the next day you need coffee, so where's coffee? So how many of you have heard of the adaptive rules module from Adam Kahn from Sitecore? One? Okay. It very much does what I described earlier with the region group, very easily and generically. So for that, I had to create a content type that was a region group, and then allow you to add regions under it. So it is that multi-drop-down effect. And with that, you can create as many as you want or need. And so I'll come back to that here in a minute. As far as the bigger benefits of that and where it will help with creating these rules. But what I like to think of is the personalization. It's been there. It's just a matter of getting people to understand it, how to use it, and then do it and effective and efficiently. And so here is the slide. Provider. I mentioned the open weather map. I created that rule specifically for open weather map. But now my content editors want to use some other weather provider. Some other new guy came in and said, oh, we're going to buy this one, etc. And so with this, I could actually click on the provider, and then you get a choice drop down. The adaptive rules makes it very easy to do. You're not having to create custom content types. You can create these parent-child choices all day long. And so now at the very bottom, where the provider from Open Weather Map or Weather Underground or whoever come up with another one, you can easily create it and not have to worry about it. All you have to do is change it. And so for many times, this is the way you would want to set up some of your rules so that you could change out providers like that. But again, what's the risk there? Anybody?
Over engineering, if they don't need it.
But some, yeah. But definitely the other thing that we're trying to reduce here is how many content editor rules they have to change. And so if they said, oh, well, we're going to put the weather here or there, or some other XYZ provider, real estate data, and then they do change providers, now they have to go back everywhere that they had used that rule and change the provider everywhere. And so what would make more sense in a lot of those situations is to set that up as a setting somewhere.
So perhaps I'm jumping ahead, but given the dependency on service calls to external providers, is there a way to execute these asynchronously, or does this happen essentially on request?
So if you're trying to do it in personalization, then you need to have it done synchronously, so that that specific instance of the page can be personalized based off of that data. And so even a few times, Sitecore's had a glitch in their GeoIP lookup, so that the very first time you hit the page, it couldn't identify where you're at. It was the refresh, and now it knows where you're at for that reason, because it does do the lookup asynchronously, but by the time it had that information, you had already displayed the component. So the biggest thing is, if for as much of that data as you can, do that on user sign up when they create their account, those kind of things. One of the APIs that I mentioned saw, I think, on the slide was called Full Contact. That was a project that we did 2 years ago on the Sitecore Hackathon. I've participated every year and have yet to have one finished in the 24-hour deadline, as you have to have it done. But it's been a great learning experience, and that was one of the APIs that we did. So Habitat, you create a user account, so somebody going to your website, signing up, and then it calls this one API, and it comes back with as many social networks as it can find for that email address. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, as many as it can find, and one call, versus having to ask the user, enter in all these things. And so at that point, you can do a lot of those lookups and store that onto their profile, as long as the service will let you, terms of agreement, then you can store that on their XDB profile. Yes, anytime you can, you'll definitely want to do it. But for personalization on that page, you've either got to have it done well in advance, like when they signed up, because you can tell they're from, enter in your zip code. At that point, you're not even having to use GeoIP. You can tell where they're from without having to use a cost of a GeoIP. Right? So yeah, the moral of this story, for some rules, this is a good approach. And that's one of the paths I started to go down when I was looking at temperature weather map providers. But then, when you step back and think about it, that's a lot of rules that somebody could potentially have to change if they actually did personalize the site based off of it. And instead, stick that in the settings over here. This is our weather provider, and then you only have one place to change it. Okay, so there's a good, you never know when the use cases will happen, but there's still a good use story here for one of these rules, one of these days. Yes?
Are pages that use rules slower in general, or not necessarily? It depends on what type of services those.
If you are calling services out, then there will be a performance hit. It's a matter of how heavy that is, and to a certain extent, you can establish kill times, so that if it doesn't come back within so many seconds, ignore it and go to the default content. The rule editor, as I show you some of the personalization examples, is very efficient, and it's been in the platform for a long time, and is used throughout the platform for a lot of things, not just personalization. And so that rule configuration is very powerful. I really like it a lot. I've seen it used on wild things to a certain extent of, I don't know. There's just a bunch of examples that are out there in the marketplace if you look at rules and how many times the developers have used it for various things. So the rules themselves really don't impact it. It's a matter of where that end integration happens. And so yes, if you're trying to integrate with the weather service out there, XYZ, then yeah, there will be an impact. So at the moral of the story, though, it's really that not can you personalize it, or how, again, it comes back to what can it do? Well, it can do anything. It's a matter of finding the data that's relevant to your end users, your customers, etc. And then you can personalize it. And so at that point, how many APIs are out there? Right now, we're probably talking 10,000-ish, just throwing numbers and darts. But everybody's on the API bandwagon. Plus, there's REST APIs, right? And that's the new way of doing all APIs. How many of you have done WCF? How about ASMX? Yeah, okay. Now you're really dating yourself, right? Because all of that stuff is basically dead. There's very similar to, how many of you doing web forms? Web control. Yeah, exactly. And everyone else then is doing MVC, right? Yeah, okay. Because web forms is dead, right? It's not dead. It's just they're not making any investments in making it better over time. And I'll get to that closer to the end. But the point is you have that many thousands and thousands of APIs, and each one of those potentially having thousands and thousands of data points. Each one of those could be one of the rule editor choices of, if the stock market value goes up or down, you want to change the piece of content. If the price goes above XYZ, those kind of things. And at that point, your mind just gets blown. Number one, how many rules you could end up having if you created a rule for every one of those APIs, right? So it's a matter of, again, trying to find the ones that are of value and relevant to those use cases. And so now I like to say that the evolution of personalization is here, because it's not just the 120 plus rules that are out of the box, but it's easy to create your own. It's just a matter of knowing which ones are relevant. And then I like to come up with this one. Never limit the imaginization, because you can personalize on anything. Now you know I have kids, so it's fun. But wait, there's more. Because you built this really cool, and I started hint at this earlier. You built this really cool personalization rule, right? Now they come up with this request. They want to display on the page what the temperature is. Or let's take the stock market. That's a good example because a lot of corporations that are publicly traded need to display where that stock price is somewhere, somehow, right? You don't know how many times past the ASP websites, the customer says, well, my site's really slow every page. Why? Well, they're not caching it. They're making that request every time. If they were caching it, they weren't doing it very well. But that stock was on every single page at the top. And so you fix that in one place and boom, it makes a dramatic improvement. But that's the similar thing. If you started out with that tunnel vision of they want to personalize because if the stock market goes up, they want to say buy, 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 or vice versa. And now they want it on the page. Oh my gosh, now I have to go back and take the code that I wrote spent so much time integrating with this service and that service, and just to get it on the page too. And then you end up potentially doing the same thing because you're still just trying to embed it in this piece of code here. But again, it's all .NET underneath. So go back to the basic building blocks, and you can put that piece of integration anywhere, everywhere, because I'll show you by example in my code samples that instead of this cycle that I've been on of, oh wait, now let me go back and redo it again so I can use it everywhere else. So when I first started doing this, I come up with this concept of using the namespace of Sitecore shared source connector for Zillow, connector for Weather Underground, connector for XYZ. And at least that way, if that API changed, I'd only have to change it in one piece, one place, right? And that was working pretty well until I come up with better ideas, which to a certain extent, that's all Sitecore. What we're talking about is just .NET. It's not Sitecore specific. So if you take back every single integration piece to just the bare minimum of integrating with REST-based APIs or WCF type service calls, XML, JSON, whatever, now it's at a very basic component that can integrate with not just Sitecore, but Xamarin and anything else that you come up with. And so that's where the beautiful part of .NET Core comes in. How many of you played with .NET Core? Sitecore itself has at least one product that is using it, and I just happened to see that they have a job posting out there that's asking for someone with .NET Core experience. Just because I subscribe to Sitecore, just to get an idea of what kind of person they're looking for, right? I can tell you they don't pay enough for me. But .NET Core is foundationally dramatically different from Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft for 3.5 years, and when I went and joined them, I said, I'm going to teach the SharePoint team, or tell the SharePoint team what they should do to make SharePoint the better public-facing website platform. And you know what they said? Anybody? Yes? What is Microsoft all about now? Azure. No, we have our own roadmap to the cloud. We don't care about anything else, and that's why SharePoint is still where it's at today. Now, granted, it's multi-tenant Office 365 in the cloud, but even 2 years ago they said, we're not ready for public web. We're not doing SharePoint. But that was at Balmer, and this is past Balmer now, so they have dramatically changed their story because now even .NET is open source. .NET Core is fully open source and cross-platform. You can run it on Linux, you name it, you'll be able to run it anywhere. And it's flexible, modular. You can go out to GitHub, I think is what they use, and get the nightly check-ins almost. So it kind of comes back to doing it right the first time, which was the moral of the developer story of not getting tunnel vision and building just a personalization component or rule. Because one of those other stories, how are we doing on time? Okay, I have 50 minutes. I'll spew a little bit more for developers. How many of you use interfaces? Okay, I think that was most of the developers. Because I found myself time and time again saying, oh, I'm going to create this small component, and I do it, and it works, right? As an example is this list renderer. The first iteration, it just did exactly what he was describing of the page list, what its children are, and then using HTML markup tokenized tags, I could change whether I want an image or however every single one of these was, and the wrappers around it, okay? And that worked great. And then the next iteration I said, and that's all data source driven, but then I said, well, what, somebody else needed an RSS module over here on the old Sitecore 6 site. So just change the data source to http://bingsearch.com, and now you get an RSS feed of search results. But you had to change how you did things. And I must have this slide hidden. Yeah, hang on. Because I only had 30 minutes the last time I did this. So I didn't even mention any of this. Hang on. So the first one was get Sitecore content. That was children content, but then since it's data source driven, you can point it to a different node over here and get the children under that one, right? And then the next one, again, I mentioned RSS feeds. Now I created this method that's get web content. And my if was if the data source starts with HTTP, call that one. Then the next thing I came up with was this database content. So I created two different template types. One was a connection string, one was a SQL query. Now I point it to the SQL query, which had a child or a drop-down choice for connection string, and now I could execute against any SQL query to get my list of data. However, my list renderer now started looking like spaghetti code because I'm saying if this, if this, if this, if this. If I would have simply went back to an iData source at the very beginning, then I could easily plug in another if I wanted to look at file systems or call service XYZ. The core of this thing didn't have to change. I could simply create a new interface to deliver it and making it plug and play, basically, right? So that's one story I like to keep doing, even though I continually every day find myself doing the same thing. I want to chalk it up to the agilist trying to do a minimal viable product, do the least amount of work to get the thing out the door, but then at the end of the day, it ends up biting you. So as much as you can, build an interface around whatever you need. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Let's see. We did the refactor, the journey, the code for the entire platform, .NET Core for maximum reusability. One thing I want to point out, if I can go back quick enough, the .NET Core, so all of these were regular project files or solution, in the solution, but then on these, the ones that say portable beside it, those are .NET Core. In Visual Studio 2015, at least, it showed that portable beside it. I don't know if 2017 does that or not. I haven't paid attention. But before, with 2015, you had to download the separate enhancement SDK to mess with .NET Core. If you're playing with Visual Studio 2017, it's all in there already. And so you can actually start playing with it. There's a couple points to point out, and those will probably be no-brainer if you step back and think about it. File system. If you're writing .NET Core, you can't use Windows API specific file system stuff. You have to create a wrapper so you can switch it out whenever your platform changes, those kind of things. But otherwise, 90% of what you do, especially if you're doing REST-based APIs, is simplified. And then I want to show this thing again. Because all of this is going in GitHub as open source. I even have the placeholder out there for it. And I've been trying, but I keep hitting my head against the wall because the very next one that I came up with was the fact that out of all of these APIs, a good 80% of them are REST-based APIs. And with taking that interface approach, I've been able to reduce the code down to, I'll reduce it by about 80%. And then I don't have to write even new code for a new REST-based API. All I have to know is the API endpoint and what are the required parameters, and then of course if there's optional ones that would make sense or not. But the full contact, free GeoIP, I mean, just 80% of them, you don't need custom code to hit. It's REST-based APIs, it's endpoints, that's all you're managing at that point. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now, is refactoring that because I created this iConnect, I think it's called it. And now everything implements that interface, and if I'm calling this API or that API, I don't have to write custom code anymore. Let's see. Okay. for at least a quick demo. This is a clean Sitecore 8.2 update 3. I just downloaded and installed it earlier today. And show you what the page looks like without personalization. But while it's spinning up, I figured it would have done that while I was showing my presentation. But while it's doing that, oh, you can't even see it.
Nice car, man.
Yeah. That was my dream car until I spent so much money on my house on wheels. But while it's spinning up, bonus points for anyone besides Paul that can say where that site's hosted. Azure. So I do own appblocks.net, and that's the other reason that I've kind of not checked anything into GitHub to share it, is because I own appblocks.net, where I'm also making this multi-tenant. What that means is anybody in the world could go to appblocks.net, give me a username and password, and or sign up with any other social accounts you want, Twitter, Google, whatever. And now all you have to manage in here is your API keys, because that is now the golden ticket. Because you can't use mine, because that would cost me money. So you could go here, enter in your API keys, execute against any of these APIs. The only benefit of that is that with one API call to appblocks.net in Azure, it could call out all these other APIs with one call. You can simply, well, it is a parameter in my call, which API are you going to call? And then you pass it the appropriate data that it needs. Versus the other option is you download the code, because it'll be free on GitHub, and put it into your own solution and execute it on your own servers, on your own site, where you have to put in your own API keys anyway. But that's my plans for free. I might add a Google ad on the side, but I doubt that I make any money with it, because that's not what it's about anyway. So first, everyone's seen this page, which is the default page of Sitecore. If it loads. Content editor. I've only got 20 sites running on this laptop, so bear with it. There's the page. Everyone's seen it. The lady on her phone, she can't put it down, right? Can't take her eyes off of it either, can she? So in the content editor, again, I mentioned the first thing that you have to do personalization is have content. So the first thing I did was come down here, create a global repository for content for the home page, and then basically created a different version of that as many times as I needed or wanted to change it for personalization rules. And in this case, I have not set it back yet, so that's good, because it is still showing the default. So how many of you have actually done it or seen it? Okay. So you click on the item that you're going to personalize. There's 3 ways of doing it, supposedly. At least the Sitecore certification exam says there's a 3rd. But what are the 2 main ones that everyone would use?
Experience editor.
Experience editor and then the content editor, which is where I'm at today. But supposedly the Sitecore 8 certification says that you can do it from the marketing control panel too. And I went in there and I'm like, where? I see where you can adjust rules and things, but I don't see where you apply those to the component of the page. So yeah, so I was certified with Sitecore 5.3. They didn't have personalization by then. All right, so the first thing you'll notice when you pull up the presentation details or the layout details either here or from the editor experience, that this particular one has a glyph there that says 6. What that means is it has 6 rules that have modified the presentation details on it. Okay? And as you can see, the others don't have any. And that's what it came with out of the box, is none. And so I came in here in the control panel first, and came over here, you click on the particular component, you say you want to personalize. And this actually has changed a little bit over versions. It actually gives you some percentages here, how many people it might hit, some numbers and metrics and things like that. It has this nice little turn on and off at the top. In case you do want to play with something that is calling some external services that does hinder performance, you can come in and turn it off pretty quick, right? But it is turned on, and every single one at original point has a default. That's what is currently displayed there. And all you're changing is the data source type, usually. But in more recent versions, you can actually change the actual rendering that's being used on there too. And so for Mondays, when the current day is Monday, basically anytime you add a new one, all you're getting is this blank rule picker that I showed you many times, except in smaller pieces, because this thing has about 120 things in it here. Now granted, if you know what you're looking for, there's a search box you can search, and GeoIP. Oh, it just went away when I hit enter. Sorry. But way down here under GeoIP, you can even do it at a city level. But can you imagine how many rules you'd have to create if you were trying to do major cities? Anyway, you get the point. Now, I think area code. But all these things are out of the box, and at least the GeoIP lookup is reasonably cheap, if not. There's several providers out there. It's a matter of if you want to make the investment per call to get that information for your users, is there other services, again, that gives you even more data that you then would have to call out to some other service to get it and can do it all in one, etc. Or Sitecore has it brilliantly out there in Azure. So I chose this one for the current day of the week because that's built in and you can reasonably easy use that. But there's massive amounts, especially when you start actually setting up the full-blown marketing capabilities of the platform with the engagement rules and goals and all the other good personas and all the other beautiful things that are there for other presentations. But you click the rule above, and now the rule comes down here, and that's where you get to then pick what your choice is. So my example earlier with the provider, that's exactly what you would get, is this would pop up, and now you pick open WeatherMap or some other provider. And that adaptive rules engine actually allows you to do that more efficiently. But I also think I was told from Adam in the one email conversation a few months back that one of the Sitecore 8 updates actually kind of builds that functionality into the product too. If you know how to use the tagging correctly, that's my understanding. So I haven't dived into that yet. So on this one I said we're Monday. Can't even see. But then there's an OK button at the bottom. And then you simply pick from the wizard where the content is that you want to display. And so I appropriately named these Monday, Thursday, Friday. I picked that, but I went ahead and left the rendering the same on all of them. And that. Oh, so we are over here in the experience editor. But if I open up a different browser, which is how I like to test these kind of things, because Sitecore with cookies likes to inject stuff to know that you're signed into Sitecore, and that's why it's showing me the experience editor view of the page, even though I just wanted to look at the page itself, and it says that it's this way. But again, as I mentioned earlier, from being in the experience editor and preview mode and all that good jazz. So if you go to preview, there it is. Go edit. Gotta get a weird side rail. Right here, very similar to what he was showing with the variations and the accelerator. There's the amount of personalization, renderings or changes or rules. And from this drop down, it's right here. It can show you what you're currently looking at is the default, but you want to see what it would look like on Tuesday. Anyway, click down here and then go away somewhere. It says Tuesday over there. Then, there you go, it's moved to the bottom. All right. And then we can change to Wednesday, where I say it's hump day. And that dynamically would change every day of the week. You can do it by days of the month. And some of those types of things are very easy out of the box. If you want to do flash sales the last week of the month, to try to get as many sales as you can before the month end, those kind of things. And so that's really easy personalization. And in the experience editor, again, at the very bottom is edit conditions. And all it does is pull up that same thing we were looking at already, where you can add a new rule at the top. And then you could say last week of the month. Click edit rule, and right down here on day, when the date has passed, current day of the week, current day of the current month, January through December. You might have different deals going on in those months, etc. You get the point. That's all out of the box, easy to do. So the main thing at that point, and there's several blog posts out there. Jill, can't remember her last name. Search for it. Personalization, content, that's what she's all about, is the content strategy around it and trying to organize it, because that then becomes the most, as he said, even in those mythical things, before you even get phase one done, especially if you're doing it in a linear approach, the tail end is all the content editing that has to be done. So as much as you can do advanced, that's where all the time's spent. And just coming up with what is of value. Any questions?
Yeah, for your earlier example about the regional groups, any reason you wouldn't utilize a predefined condition to build those versus building content items out and having to build individual content items to create the groups?
Predefined condition.
Underneath the marketing control panel. So it allows you to create a rule from all the rule set engine. So it's one set of rules. So if I wanted to use a region group, I can choose a predefined condition in your out-of-the-box list.
Okay, and then you change the condition in one place.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
But you can also use that to create that group of conditions. So I can create the group of all the states to create a region versus creating more content items and content editor to manage.
Awesome. So they've already built the adaptive rules engine there into the control panel.
Yeah.
Awesome. See, when like I said, I was certified 5.3, and they didn't have much of this because most of this came with 6.4 OMS, then BMS, and now where it's at today. And that's when I was at Microsoft. When I came back, I was like, what have they done? Wow, this is awesome. And so this is my story of learning it, and so I'm glad they've built that in. And therefore, that is better even than setting up this.
For the integration side, it's still very appropriate.
Yeah.
But it's more just a group of existing rules, or even when you create your own rules. If I personalize on 15 different pages of my site, I have one set of rules to edit if I ever change my regional groups.
Yeah.
Versus going to each page and changing the rules that I set up.
And let's take the provider model discussion, and as long as you set up the rules that way, you can do it in one place for the rules. But I would still even then probably recommend a setting over here, who your provider is.
Yeah.
So that you change it there, and then you probably don't even have to change the rule. Because then there's the whole platform. And you still may even be able to do the marketing.
Yeah.
Pull it from there too. Cool. Awesome. That's out of how many presentations now? You're the first one to pull up exactly where that's all located and how. Awesome. That makes me think. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned .NET Core, and I think that's pretty awesome. I ended up pausing on that because it sounds like, I'm not sure what they're doing with something else called .NET Standard.
I haven't heard of .NET Standard yet. Okay. I do know that Microsoft is still heavily pushing .NET Core, and it's like up to 1.1 or something. I don't know. It used to be. It used to even have a different name. I don't even remember what they named it before now. It's so Sitecore, let alone keeping up with .NET too.
Right. Exactly.
But I do know that even for I'll do a plug for a conference. It's Nebraska Code. I'm sure it's still a good chunk away. But I think it's in May, the same time as Amsterdam, because he just on Slack had asked for somebody that could do a .NET Core full-day workshop. And guess who was quick to reply? No. Well, yeah, I said I would if I wasn't in Amsterdam. I definitely would have. But because I actually did submit for Detroit Code, which is, I don't remember when, later in the year. But no, well, the answer to that is Microsoft. So Microsoft quickly said, we'll come in and do that. So they definitely, I don't know what standard is, so I couldn't really answer that. I'll have to look it up. Yeah. Everyone's moving as fast as they can. But I can tell you that Sitecore, does anyone know from brownie points what Sitecore has done with .NET Core? Specifically? Nobody? The publishing service. How many of you have large amounts of content? Okay. So when you hit publish, how long does it take? If you, especially don't do a whole site publish, right? During the day, it's on a scheduled basis. On the weekend,
if I have to publish a product silo of 50,000 SKUs, it takes a little while.
Yes. So have you heard of the new publishing service? No. So, which version of Sitecore?
7.2.
I know. Okay. So, for, I don't know, 8 something and up.
Yeah.
8.2 up only? Okay. They have a standalone service called the New Publishing Service, and it's only of applicable interest to those that have greater than 20,000 or something. I mean, it's pretty high. But if you have that many items and you do it, it's running in .NET Core and it takes like that. It's very, very fast. And then again, I don't know where else, but I know they have I can almost remember from the job description where they were trying to use .NET Core next, but I can't remember. But search Sitecore, and you'll be able to see that. Let's see. Because okay. And then in closing, we want more get social, like you learn together. There's me, Sitecore Slack. I had to steal your bit.ly link. But then I got the Sitecore UG that actually has a map. That's mostly updated, but I know there's about 4 or 5 that aren't even listed there. I doubt Green Bay's on there. But there's also a Reddit Sitecore user group listing, and that's the one that I found is most accurate. Plus, when I found 4 that were missing, you can contact them and they added them very quickly. So that right now is the best list of Sitecore user groups is on Reddit. And like a wiki page that you don't have permission to edit, but you can submit to the guy and make the change pretty quickly. Launch Sitecore.net. How many of you seen that website? Not everybody? Okay. I gotta show you that one. Because a lot of these things, they really dive deeper into on it. And some other cool things. So right over here, if you start clicking and you start looking at dev content, and then you come over here and you pull up this little glyph, it'll tell you you're a developer or you're a marketer. And so this is the analytics, what pages you visited, whether you've achieved any goals, what location, and right there you can see that even the GeoIP on their site isn't real time for the very first hit for some reason at the moment, unless we're like, really tricking them out because we're behind a firewall or something. Yeah, still pending. Anyway, but that, and I don't know what the heart and stuff is, but I'm sure it has to do with how many goals and stuff. But you can put that into your page if you wanted, or if not, then as a minimum, you can personalize based off of all that type of activity on the site. And there was another one. It's not wanting to go to the side very well. Okay. Marketplace.sitecore.net, Sitecore user channels, master Sitecore, I'm going to be pushing some YouTube videos. I just recorded 2 of them today on doing these basic things, exactly what I just showed you. So for those that you know that didn't get to see it, and want to see how to do basic personalization, because that was the #1 question. Now, at the end of the day, I was like, okay, we just talked about integrating, personalizing on anything and everything. Any questions? Why do you do it? Okay. And I kind of showed in the rule editor, but that is like 3 clicks deep. So going back from the very top does definitely make sense. And then there's one more. There's also, well, that's probably enough time. 8:44. We could go on for a second. Any other questions? Okay, that's it then. Thank you.